For today's episode on the Pathmark Presents podcast, I have a very interesting guest. I am here with David Smyth today, who is the CEO at Complish. And Complish is accomplishing something very interesting because it helps your team to stay aligned and feel connected and then focus on their priorities. Many teams out there, a lot of the folks have been on the show actually obviously had to switch to a remote setup, and then how do you keep the team focused, and how do they not actually end up having to set up a call for every little item that has to be discussed. So I've got David here, who's going to tell us much more about what Complish is all about and how he thinks about growth for the company, and also how he got to this place where he's at today. So welcome to the show, David.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Very cool. So maybe tell us in your own words, what is Complish all about?
Yeah, so Complish is a collaboration tool for teams who don't work in the same office, which is most teams these days. It helps teams, as you said, stay aligned and connected when they're not together. It's not a tool that's competing against the likes of Zoom and Slack, which most teams are using. It's rather an asynchronous communication tool. So what Complish is really replacing is some of the time spent in meetings. Typically, when companies moved to remote after the pandemic hit, people spent 25, I think the data said 25% more time in meetings. And this was all over Zoom or Google Meet. And what we're seeing now is that teams are really suffering from a lot of Zoom fatigue, video conferencing fatigue. So Complish helps reduce the amount of time spent on those meetings by making it easier to communicate asynchronously between meetings, and making it easier to share what you're working on and the progress of work. So Complish connects to other tools that you use, whether it's Jira, Asana, project management tools, your calendar, helps you plan your day, communicate that with your team, and also has a collaborative meeting notes doc so that you can communicate between the meeting and as well as during the meeting, and making that meeting transparent and visible to everyone on your team.
Very cool. Who would be typically the champion within a company to bring in Complish into the teams?
Yeah, this really Complish is a bottoms-up tool, so you can actually get use of it out of Complish as an individual or a small team. So right now we're seeing the person that's typically picking up Complish is the individual in the team who cares most about the efficient running of that team. So sometimes that is the product manager, a team lead. Sometimes it's a manager. In small teams, it can be the founder. So it's a fairly wide variety of personas, but really it is the person inside of a single team who cares about the efficient running of that team.
Very cool. Makes a lot of sense. And what would be the journey? You mentioned it's a bottom-up approach. People discovering it in their for their work and in their work scenarios. What would be a typical journey that somebody goes through in order to learn about Complish? Like, what would be the channels that you guys have been exploring?
Yeah, at this stage, a lot of it is focused on social. So SEO, we are starting to work on SEO, but as you know, SEO takes some time. But so at this stage, it's typically social. They would find out about us on LinkedIn or Twitter, land on the website, and it's free to sign up and create an account. So typically one person has a play around with it. If they like the feel of it, they invite a teammate, and it spreads from there within a team.
Very cool. So I was actually just about to ask you what role the website plays in that journey. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit. It seems like it's a product-led growth setup, or could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is right now the only pathway, the only entry point into the product. So we're not doing there's no account management. There's no sales involved at this stage. So the website is really, the social is the awareness. The website communicates our value prop and is the top of that funnel into the product. So it definitely plays an important role.
Very cool. Yeah, we talk a lot about websites here in the Pathon Presents podcast quite naturally. I would be curious, obviously, as a co-founder and a CEO, a lot of founders that we had on the show, they always have a very critical eye on their website since they know about the importance for the team. What would you say? What is the major strength of the website in your eyes at the moment?
It communicates fairly well our opinionated view on how teams should communicate when they're remote. So if someone lands on the website and they read a little bit, they either buy into or don't buy into our vision, and then that gets them into the product. So we still have to improve and play with the value prop, but I think we do a good job on the website of communicating why we built this thing. And if people believe in that, then they jump in and give the product a try.
Awesome. Pretty good. I was actually about to ask you where you see room for improvement. Could you elaborate? Like, where do you see chances to, maybe even uplift signups or trials from the page?
Yeah, so we definitely will play with the copy and the positioning and explaining the product a little bit better. We are doing something which is a little bit new in asynchronous communication. So we need to make it clearer how this is different to the other tools that you use. So messaging and positioning, we will need to do a lot of A/B testing there. Right now, we don't really do anything to track who is engaging on the website. Obviously, we see people when they sign up, but we really don't have any idea of who is on the website if they don't sign up. And just generally, I think we can improve the funnel. We have right now quite a few people who visit our blog, and that is improving. And we don't do a great job of really funneling those blog visitors into the product or onto the other areas of the website.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Super interesting. Let's come back to the product, right? So you mentioned asynchronous work communication is obviously something that has a touch of, maybe new for a lot of teams. What would you say is sort of the main competitive advantage when going with that approach?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a ton of synchronous communication tools on the market, from what we're using right now, where we're on Zoom, to Slack, to Microsoft Teams. All of these tools are built to communicate in the moment, to send a message and ideally get a response, but they're built to interrupt work. And our philosophy is that we believe that there is a lot of communication that doesn't need to interrupt the work that you're doing. It doesn't need to interrupt focus. So the main competitive advantage is that we're a tool that allows you to communicate without interrupting. But also because we connect to the existing tools that you use, and we do connect to your calendar, we help teams to adopt slowly the practices of asynchronous communication. So it can be a hard thing to go from expecting a response immediately to fully asynchronous communication. So Complish is a tool that helps teams kind of take baby steps in the direction of asynchronous communication and just move some forms of communication into async. And there aren't a lot of tools out there on the market that do that. So that's our main differentiator.
Super interesting. So if I understand that right as a layman, does that mean so my team, who is sort of constantly interrupting itself by chatting each other, requesting help here and there, that would move into sort of an asynchronous stream where people can not have the feeling to have to interact and react right now? Is that sort of how I understand it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or if your team previously attended a meeting, they can communicate a little bit more between that meeting. And so perhaps some of the attendees don't need to attend the meeting and they can just read the collaborative doc. Or some of the rest of the attendees who do attend the meeting, when they get there, they have a lot more context already. So they can either spend less time talking about work in the meeting, less time in the meeting, or more time in the meeting, building a social connection.
Makes sense. Super interesting. Cool. I would love to switch gears a little bit, right, and talk a little bit about your personal journey as being a founder. Maybe you could tell me first, like, being a founder, building up the team and the product. Where do you go to educate yourself? Like, what's the content that you consume? How do you filter content? What's the platforms that you would, use?
I am a massive consumer of podcasts. I probably listen to 3 hours of podcasts a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a little bit on the commute and also when I'm working. So, absolutely, podcast is how I educate myself. Outside of that, I do spend a little bit of time on Twitter, and so yeah, podcasts and Twitter it is for me.
Very good. A particular podcast that you would, prefer?
Wow. The one that comes to mind right now that I do listen to every episode they produce is a podcast called Venture Stories by Eric Torenberg. But yeah, there are tons.
Very cool. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, I would love to jump into our rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
Sure.
Very good. What's the last book you read?
The last book I read. I'm currently reading Ender's Game, which is a fiction book, but the last book that I finished reading was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Mm-hmm. What's one single thing that the company is focused on the most at the moment?
We're still building our product. So we have a big upcoming release. So we're heavily focused on getting kind of this iteration of the product out.
Very cool. If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing you would want to have fixed for the company today?
No boundaries in technology. Yeah. Can I come back to that one?
Sure. No worries at all. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
The last thing that literally kept me awake at night was my 1-year-old baby. But the last thing that kept me awake at night for the company, it probably was fundraising.
Makes sense. And if today would be your first day, right, starting to work on Complish, what's the one advice that you would give yourself?
Talk to customers right from the start and take them along the journey of building the product with you.
Very cool. David, I really want to say thank you that you took time and went on the Pathmark Presents podcast with us today. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting everything that we discussed about Complish today, what's the one thing that they should remember about the company?
If you find yourself in a meeting and thinking that this could have been communicated some other way, then give Complish a try.
Thanks for being part of Pathmark Presents.
Thank you.